Thank you, Kimmy. I'm very happy to be here and feel very grateful and honored that I've been asked to do this talk for the Kirby Center on family violence. And I have some very specific things that are dear and true to my heart. So don't mind me if I look down every now and then to kind of just make sure I know I'm where I'm at. So this talk is centered around two key ideas. One is about what I call the three S's, which is safety, support, and self-care. And the other is the window of tolerance. And so I'm going to start with the first one, which is safety, support, and self-care, because for me, they're very, very important when we talk to any individual and we have any conversation. So first of all, safety is a basic need. It's something that we all need as we live our lives. We need to feel safe. We need to have somewhere to go that we feel safe. We need to have this place where we can rest, where we can rejuvenate, where we can feel comfortable. And that's also where we need to get our basic needs met. So we need to be able to have food and shelter, and all of those things are related to safety. So when we feel safe, we can grow. And that's the first step of looking at anything when it comes to, for me, any client, because I do therapy as well as teach, and also to look at when we're looking at family violence. So when we look at family violence or domestic violence, intimate partner violence, first of all, we have to look at, is the person safe? And our job is to provide safety. The next part is to think about if our person is not safe. So what happens when we're not safe? If I'm a child and I'm not safe and I can't trust the people who are in my life, the caregivers are in my life to nurture me, to take care of me, to make sure that I have food, then I begin to do things to get those needs met. I might lie, I might steal, I might be aggressive. So I'm going to do those things as a child to figure out how to get those needs met. If I'm an adult and I'm not safe, then the same thing happens. I spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to figure out how to be safe. How do I get my needs met? And so I circle back. It's almost like being stuck. Like you're stuck in the snow and you keep burning your tires around and around because you can't figure out how to move. And so people spend a lot of time not recognizing how important safety is. So the second part of that is looking at support. So when you think about support, those are the people that we care for us, that understand us, that nurture us. And so we all have those people in our lives who provide psychological and physical support to us. So when we're a child, it's our families, it's other caregivers, it would be teachers, coaches, all of those people make up our support team. And I might call it a circle of support, or I might even say who's on your team. If I'm having a child, who's on your team? Who's there to support you? So looking at that, I might want to look at then, when we get into adulthood, who are in the circle of supports as an adult? Is it our family members? Is it our partner? So when we're an adult, we have a lot more choices about who we bring into our lives. So it might be the people that we are friends with. It might be our work colleagues. It might be our intimate partner. It's our family. So those are the people that we want to have in our lives who support us. And then, however, if the person or one of those people becomes abusive and it's an abusive relationship, then the circle of support often shrinks. And so people don't reach out to other people. I don't know whether, sometimes I think it's because of fear, and other times I think it's because of shame. So do we want to tell people that something has happened to us? Like last night, something happened and I just don't feel good about myself and I'm not reaching out to my support system, or I'm afraid they're going to be judging me about what has happened to me and the choices I'm making. And so we make our circle of support smaller and smaller and smaller, and we get rid of the people on our team. So what I want you to do is take a moment before I go on, is to go back and think about safety. Between 1 and 10, how safe are you in this world? Do you have a safe place to go? Do you have a home, a shelter, a place that you feel safe? And the next part is, who's on your team? Who does support you? Who does take care of you? And who does nurture you? And if not, it's about us to reach out to help you find more people in that circle of support. So when we keep silent and we don't tell people about that we need support, that we need safety, then we don't see the need to reach out to others. We become much more isolated, and we don't take care of ourselves. Because if I don't think it's important to me, or not important, I don't think I can meet with you because I can't share with you what's happening to me, then I don't want to take care of myself. And so we shrink. And so we don't acknowledge that we're valuable, that we're important in this world. And so one of the things is what does self-care look like? So even if we took 5 minutes at a time to get a tea, get a cup of coffee, have a drink of water, just walk outside and feel the earth, have a breath of fresh air. Those are things that we can all do in 5 minutes to say that we're valuable. And we get larger and larger, spending bigger times of self-care. Can be reading a book. It's watching our favorite TV show. It's listening to music. It's doing all the things that are acknowledge who we are as an individual. And so again, think about what you do for self-care. And if we review those 3 S's, the safety and how safe you are from harm, that is what safety is, being safe from harm, being safe from being unhurt. Support, who is in your circle of support? I like the phrase, who's on your team? So who's on the team? And in self-care, what do you do to show yourself that you're important and that you have value even for 5 minutes a day? Now, moving on to the 2 terms that we're looking at, family violence or domestic violence. So what is that? What does we mean by that? So I'm going to read a definition. It says the act or experience of violence or abuse that occurs within a family or intimate relationship. There are no exclusionary criteria as it occurs in all socioeconomic levels, all cultures, all ages, all religions, basically at each stage of life. The potential is there for all of us to experience or commit abuse or violence towards another person. Intentional or not intentional exists for everyone. So what kind of violence or abuse am I referring to? Well, there's several kinds, and I think sometimes we don't think about the different kinds of violence and abuse that there are. The first one is emotional abuse, and that's repeatedly subjecting someone to a non-physical act of aggression. It might be threats, it might be humiliation, it might be jealousy, it might be intimidation. It's something that's going on that makes us feel emotionally vulnerable constantly. Psychological abuse is knowingly exposing a person to acts or behavior that cause psychological trauma. And I think that name calling and put downs and all of those experiences that some of us can have when people are just being mean or bullying towards us, those are all things that fall under emotional and psychological abuse. There's economic abuse, and I think a lot of people don't consider that that's a form of abuse. And yet, and it's a tricky one, because I know that within different cultures or different religious groups, etc., we have who's the head of the household, who provides the money, who controls the money. And we can always think about who in our family of origin, who maintained the purse strings. And so it's violence when somebody is controlling somebody to the point that they can't feel that they have any voice or any equality in being able to get groceries or buy things for children, or to feel that they have no say in their life about the economic status. There's spiritual abuse. I think we often, again, don't think of spiritual abuse. That's when someone either puts down someone's religion or their beliefs or their practice or their spirituality, or they also may be controlling of a person not being able to have their own a sense of self within spirituality. There's clearly sexual abuse. And we all hear about sexual abuse all of the time. And I think it's important to recognize that everybody has a right to control the space around their body. There is a shield, there is a force field, there is a boundary, whatever words we want to call it. This is our personal space, and nobody has a right to intrude in that in any way. And then when it becomes sexual, for me, it becomes very spiritual and very much about attacking the soul of a person. Finally, there's physical abuse. And we all know what physical abuse looks like because that's what we see. We see the black eyes, we see the bruises, we see the people that are bleeding and punched and all of those things. We know what that looks like. And that's, people always say it's easier to come back from that. I think that's true or not true. I'm sorry. If I was in pain from being attacked, I would be in pain and it would affect all of my psyche. So remember, though, the most important thing is abuse and violence are based on power. The power to control with intent of maintaining control, and that I can't stress enough, it's all about power. Even if it's sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, all of it is about power. So the next part I want to talk about is the window of tolerance. So this is a term that's used a lot these days. And the window of tolerance is a space between what's called hyperarousal and hypoarousal. And I've been trying to think of a metaphor to explain this. And finally, I decided Jell-O salads. So if you make, like the 3-tiered layer of Jell-O salad that's multicolored, right? And you have the bottom layer and you let it sit, right? You let it harden. And then after it's hard, then you move into putting in the middle layer in. And the middle layer sits there and it moves around a little bit. And then finally you get to the top layer. Now, the bottom layer is hypoarousal. It's kind of like when we're peaceful, calm, it's firm, it's well set up, it's all of those things. The middle layer can be like a river, and it's the one in between. It's where we kind of want to be sometimes is in the middle. And the top layer is the hypoarousal. And so if we're waiting for somebody to come and we're going to try and get our Jell-O salad together and they're ringing the doorbell and we're all rushing around to get the last layer poured on and we're not taking care, and guess what happens? It melts all the other layers. So that's the hyperarousal. And so it's based on the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is the part of us that reacts to threat and violence. It reacts and it comes in, and it's what we do when we feel like somebody's going to attack us. It's when we're driving down the street in the winter and the car slides and we go, and we have that emotional reaction. That's all the sympathetic system. When we go to the parasympathetic system, that's when we're restful and peaceful. So where we want to be in the river is the fact that we want to be attentive to that the guy in front of you just slid. The car in front of you slid, and you want to be taking a moment. Or you want to be paying attention to, I am pretty stressed at work today. What's going on that I need to ask for support? So that's this window of tolerance that we can handle the stress and we don't overreact. So let's talk about the window of tolerance a little bit more. And I'm just going to read something that I thought was really impactful for me when I was kind of pulling these thoughts together today. It says the window of tolerance is a model of autonomic arousal that focuses specifically on understanding the body's nervous system regulation after experiencing trauma or intense stress. The window of tolerance comprises a range of emotional and physiological states within which the individual is able to cope with stressors. When someone's in the window of tolerance, that middle Jell-O layer, right, they're able to manage everyday stressors and changes without becoming overwhelmed or shutting down. This state allows for adaptive responses to situations and enables effective problem solving. Now, not everyone routinely operates in there. People who've been exposed to trauma, such as family and violence, may often experience too little or too much arousal, which refers to the extremes of that hypoarousal and that hyperarousal. When the individual experiences trauma or perceives a threat, their body's system kicks into action, the autonomic nervous system kicks into action to prepare the body for a response. That has two main branches, as I said, sympathetic or parasympathetic. These work together to regulate the body functions. So the sympathetic nervous system, risk perceived, initiates a series of stress responses, including fight or flight. And so our body, we're animals, we're mammals. And so when we have a perceived threat, the sympathetic nervous system comes into play, pumps a bunch of adrenaline into our body, and as our heart rate goes up, our heart pumps faster, the blood flowings go to the muscles, the airways increase the ability to have oxygen so we can run. and we can get away, and that's flight. Now, or we can fight. It does the same thing. Our body prepares to fight. So depending on who we are and our assessment of the situation, we might go into fight or flight. The parasympathetic system acts as a counterbalance to the sympathetic nervous system. It promotes relaxation, restoring homeostasis, and once the threat's passed. And it includes a slowing heart rate, a constriction of the pupils, and a stimulation of our digestion. Because if we're running in through the woods to get away, our digestion doesn't want to be working. It just shuts down. But when we're calm and peaceful, back to that feeling of safety, then we can have good digestion. So the two other of things that we can do when we feel a threat is we can also freeze or we can fawn. So when we freeze, we're kind of like the deer in the headlights. It's like, here's the threat, and we just go, we freeze. And we just don't know what to do. And we shut down and we don't do anything. For people who are experiencing trauma, we might dissociate. For people who are feeling that they're going to be attacked, we may just freeze and don't know what to do. We don't run, we just stay still in time. The fawning is also kind of like, for me, it's kind of two things. There's a little bit of dissociation, but we kind of do whatever we can do to be safe. We help ourselves be okay, even though we know that it feels very imbalanced in our system. It's kind of like we're just okay with the jello all melted together. We don't really care that we need to do something different. So I know that Kemi has some questions for me, and so I'm going to stop here and allow Kemi to ask some of her questions. Okay. Oh, that's a good question. So what happens is if I feel threatened, and I'll just use the I because it's easier for me to talk about I, that direction. If I feel threatened, I'm going to do something in response. I may fight. I think that many people have learned, many victims of family violence have learned not to fight. I think they know not to fight because they're going to be hurt even more. So they don't fight. Or they start fighting at some point in a relationship and then they stop because they're hurt so much. They know that it doesn't really make a difference. So the first response, I think, for all of us is to fight. The second response, though, if we've been taught and socialized not to fight, and that's who we are, we don't see ourselves as fighters, we might flight. And does that mean we leave our house? Does that mean we go run to the neighbors? Do we call our family? Do we call the police? Do we call somebody to help us? I think many times people do. And then this is where I made the comment about that people sometimes have that fear and that shame, so they don't reach out. So the flight is when you try to get away and you try and do something. I think all of us would feel that if our life was severely threatened, we would try and get away. The next part, though, is I think about children kind of when I think about this, but I also know that we as adults do it. So the freeze response is, so if you threaten me and I think I can't fight you and I don't see anywhere to go, but I can't to get away, then I'm going to go, where can I go to be safe? And I think of the child that's hiding in the closet, that's hiding under the bed. They're going to hide to get away, and then they're going to freeze. Or the person that's watching a violence incident and they're freezing like this, they don't do anything. So if you're exposed over and over and over again to someone threatening you and you've adapted to freezing, to not react at all, then you become depressed. You think that you can't make choices. You just get stuck. You become the deer in the headlights. You're frozen. The last one that we talk about is fawning. And I think of fawning, I have the images whenever I make these terms, and I think of fawning as like the really cute little fawn, and it just bows and it looks so gentle and so kind. And so fawning is about doing whatever you can do to survive. It's people pleasing. It's doing something that people want you to do. It's not fighting. It's not standing up for yourself. You're just doing whatever you need to do to survive. And that also can lead to depression or a sense of helplessness or hopelessness that things will never get better. And so I think they all feed around. So you're right, Kemi, when someone makes that threat to us, we have this biological response to do something. I've talked to many people who their family members, they go, well, my parents never fought, because at some point in the relationship, the aggressive partner threatened the other person. And so they never, ever stood up again because they knew their life was going to be at risk. So that's a really good question. And I think it's something that's been researched and looked at for a very long time. A lot of people have heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And so he looks at a lot of evidence that traumatic experience leaves significant marks on the brain and the body, affecting how we think, feel, and behave. So when it comes to facing new stressors, those previously exposed to trauma have severe emotional or psychological responses or physiological responses. Trauma or perceived threats can activate the automatic nervous system through various sensory pathways, including visual, auditory, olfactory, and tactile cues. These cues trigger a rapid and automatic response and prepares the body to react. So if I'm used to being yelled at and someone has yelled at me a lot, as soon as someone raises their voices, I do this, I jerk. I'm responding to that cue. Might be an entirely different situation, but my body reacts. Trauma lives in the body long after the event, and the chronic activation of the nervous system due to repeated trauma or prolonged stress can make the nervous system more sensitive and more easily dysregulated. So, 3 ways trauma impairs functioning. One is emotional dysregulation. One is it disrupts the brain's ability to regulate emotions, leading us to difficulties in managing intense or distressing feelings. Individuals may experience mood swings, emotional numbness, difficulty identifying or expressing their emotions. The ability to regulate or apply emotional regulation can shrink the window of tolerance as we continue to just feel very tight in those areas and we can't process emotions. One of the things that happens that I've seen when I've worked with a lot of women who've been in domestic violence is that one society tells women that they're not supposed to be angry. And that's part of what happens in the world, is that women are not supposed to be angry. They're supposed to tolerate. And so women, when they've been in long-term family violence or domestic violence situations, they learn to shut down the emotional self. And so they turn off their part to listen, to say this is wrong. Because if I acknowledge that this feeling, what's happening to me is wrong, then I have to face it. So if I shut this down and shut down my feeling centers in my body, then I don't have to acknowledge it. So when women often, and it can be men as well, so I don't want to genderize, when an individual has been exposed to a lot of violence and they go to a shelter or they're finally safe, they have so much rage and anger because it's been compressed and shut down for such a long time. There's a huge amount of rage and anger. So the next one is trauma survivors experience specific triggers or remember their experiences with intense emotional physiological reactions. They cause us to rapidly shift from within our window of tolerance or states of hyperarousal or hypoarousal. And these unpredictability keeps narrowing the window of tolerance. So I'm going to go through a little bit more about window of tolerance after I answer some more of Kemi's questions. And so we feel constantly on guard, constantly overwhelmed by the responses to perceived threats. We may perceive something as being unsafe when it's really not unsafe. And the third area that Bessel van der Kolk talks about is to cope with trauma-related distress. We engage in that repressed emotions, avoidance. We use lots of coping to not deal with what's happening to us. And these might be substance abuse, self-harm, social withdrawal, and these unhealthy coping mechanisms provide a temporary relief, but it doesn't allow us to be able to heal or confront what's really happening. One of the things is really understanding the window of tolerance and the sense of hyperarousal, where there's too much arousal and too much cortisol going into our body that we end up having to always be activated. So what happens is that if I'm constantly waiting to be attacked. And it's the phrase we use in family violence work about walking on eggshells. So I'm constantly watching to see what's going to happen. I'm constantly walking on the eggshells. I'm always like, my body's doing it like that. I'm very aroused and I'm waiting to either run or I'm waiting to fight or I'm waiting to, so I'm just always ready. So that adrenaline, that cortisol is moving through my body all of the time. So I'm always in this plate of tension. So what happens is now that I'm safe and now that I feel better, it's kind of my comment about the women who are angry, but so that we have all these suppressed emotions that come up. At the same time, I don't understand always, it's back to did the person walk in the room? Did the door bang? Is it feel like, so those sensory triggers keep coming back to us and we react. I'll give you an example of a story from a long time ago. I was working within an agency that provided support and groups to men and women who were part of and experienced family violence in their relationship. And one of the things that was interesting was the person who was abusive was doing very, very well in their counseling. And they were doing fantastic, actually, and that things were going well. And the partner was reporting good changes. And then when they were going to do these checklists or something, it was about something was triggering her, the person that had been abused. And when they went to break it down, so that when he would be aggressive, he would pick up his hand and slam his hand onto the table. And she knew, like this, it was that sensory piece. She heard the sound, he was going to be abusive. And that's what she lived with for years. And then what they found out was he was using all the tools. He was walking away. He was making good choices, but he still would do the hand slap because that was just his automatic reaction. So for her, when you're asking what happens for her, the violence isn't there anymore. Changes have occurred in their relationship, but this sensory piece caused her to jerk and to react and expect the worst long after it ended. So that's about, we get into that place where there's so much adrenaline, so much cortisol going into the body that it takes a very long time to process that and to get out of the state where those sensory cues don't keep coming in. Things that you just asked, Kimmy, was about what people can do. And I think the first thing is for people to understand what's happening to them in their body. So if I go back to the window of tolerance, people can realize that their sympathetic system is activated, that they're always feeling aroused. As I mentioned, that eggshell, walking on eggshells thing, they're feeling overwhelmed. They can't think clearly. They're rigid or chaotic thinking. They're anxious. They're panicked. They have emotional reactivity. So sometimes people will go like, what's wrong with me? Or people in the family will say, what's wrong with you? How come you're overreacting to everything? Or the other part is that there's a hypoarousal and they have poor contact with others. There's isolation. They're not connecting with people. When I said shrinking the support group and shrinking the team down, they're numb to their emotions. They have little awareness of any sensations. And they can't track conversations. You know, you're having a conversation with somebody and it's gone. So those two things are activated. And I think people can pay attention to what's going on for me. I'm feeling this for a long period of time. So when we are in balance in the middle jello, we feel our emotions, but we don't overreact to them. Our mind is calmer. We can say, oh, I can look for a solution to this problem. We can self-regulate. We can connect to others, and we can have new learning. So what do people need to do besides looking at those states that they might be in? Well, I like to think about those 3 S's again. So I think that someone needs to looking at going, you know what, I'm out of balance. Things are not quite right. And if I were the counselor, I would be asking how safe they are. But I think people can answer that for themselves. How safe do I feel? Remember that 1 to 10, looking at how safe do you feel? Do I feel safe in my house? Do I feel safe with my relationships? Do I have my basic needs met? Am I getting my food? Am I getting groceries? Do I have the money? Now, some people live in poverty and they don't have the ability. That's not what I'm talking about. If you have economic abuse, you may not be able to get the things that you need or want to be able to live your life. So it's about looking at, am I safe in every capacity? Do I have safe places to go? And then the next part is, so if they aren't safe, what can they do? They need to think about, what do I need to be safer? Can I change something in my house? Can I do something? Often we'll encourage people to change their locks, to change their routines, to make sure they let their neighbors know, to have a safety plan if they feel threatened. Those are all things that people can do on their own, and think about, where would I go? What would happen if someone broke in my house, etc. The next part is looking at, who is in my circle of support? Who is in my safety net? Who's on my team? So often when we make a safety plan, as I think you know, Kemi, you involve the neighbors. You tell the neighbors that you are not feeling really safe, or you tell your children where to run to if they're not feeling safe. You tell people to go ahead. You need to call 911. You need to find a place to go that's safe. And you need to trust those people that will be in your circle of support. Who's on the team? And do you have family that will take you in, that will protect you? And do you keep the stories from your family and your friends, or you begin to expand that circle of support and say, I haven't been telling you these things. I had a really good friend a long time ago who was just kind of off every time we went to socialize. And finally, she told me about her husband being incredibly emotionally abusive, and that it was not a safe zone for her or her children. It took her probably 4 years, even though I would socialize and see her at events with our children, etc. And so she just took her a very long time to be able to tell me that and expand that. So I think we should also be gentle to people when they can't find those words. And I think we need to just find a way to be kind to them. And last but not least, people need to do nice things for themselves every day. One nice thing every day. Write it down on your phone, write it down in your agenda. Because what happens is if I pay attention that I'm worthwhile watching my favorite TV show tonight, and I write it down, it's a second reward for me, that I'm valuable. If I go get a cup of coffee, my favorite coffee, or I get a muffin, or I do something for myself, or I go for a walk and I stretch my legs and I can feel the fresh air, because it doesn't have to cost money. It says to myself that I'm valuable, and if I write it down, it says it twice. So I think people need to make sure they're safe. I think they need to assess if they're safe. Think they need to see who's on their team, who can they expand on their team, and lastly, they need to be nice. They need to be kind to themselves. And that's pretty much what I have to say about the window of tolerance and the 3 S's.